Scott, first I want to congratulate you on your induction to the California Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
It's quite an honor.
Appreciate it.
I have a few questions I want to ask you about your background.
Sure.
The first one is what individual had the greatest influence on your wrestling career?
The person that had the greatest influence in my wrestling was probably my wrestling coach in high school, Charlie Lemke. I went to the same college he went to, and I also had him mentor me, and then I went on to be a teacher, and when I started teaching, I went to him a lot and had him help me out with some things, and also coached with him a couple years after I graduated college.
Great. Who was your wrestling idol when you were growing up?
It's funny, I used to read a lot of the Wrestling USA magazines because there was no internet, and I read a lot about Joe Gonzalez. And Joe Gonzalez, 1980 Olympian, and he was a little guy like me, and so it was pretty inspirational to read about his accomplishments. And then it just so happened that he was able to come on board and coach with me at Santa Ana High School from 1990 to 2003. So it was kind of neat to have somebody you idled or looked up to when you were a kid and come on staff with you and coach with you too. So that was pretty neat.
What personal attribute or ability contributed most to your wrestling success?
I would say my faith in God. I was really strong about sharing my faith, and I wore it on my sleeve. And so, in fact, in high school, I wore a shirt that said "Powered by Jesus," Evergreen Wrestling on the front. And I think a lot of that had to do with my accomplishments and always staying faithful, winning and losing, which for me in college, it seemed like there was a lot more losing going on than winning. And so it was just something that kind of kept me strong and steady when things kind of got, on the down and outs while you're coaching and competing.
What is the most outstanding memory you have from your career in the sport of wrestling?
So in 1998, I had a young man named Tony Perez who qualified for the high school nationals, 103 pounds, and he went on to win the national championships that year. Beat a kid in the finals from North Carolina that was undefeated. And then the following year, in 1999, I had another young man get in the finals of the high school nationals at 112 pounds, and he won the national championship. So I had two kids back-to-back national champions that were wrestlers that just started their freshman year in high school. So that was an awesome moment for me. And then we took the Masters Championship as a team in 1990, Southern Section Masters in 1999, and we took fourth in state. Those are both very memorable. And I also have one young man that's a very accomplished fighter in the Ultimate Fighting, UFC, named Gilbert Melendez, who's been one of the top-ranked fighters for the last 10 years. And so having somebody that's a professional athlete that came out of my program and out of the high school is it's just a huge blessing for the program. So.
Throughout your wrestling career, is there one single most memorable match or event?
When I was a senior in high school, we had a tournament at my school, Evergreen High School, and I was in the finals of that tournament. And I remember it as clear as today, that he put me on my back in the first 2 seconds of the match and was up the kid was up 5-0, and I remember getting up in the second round and saying, second place isn't going to be so bad. And then I was able to come from behind and tie him up. And back in those days, overtime was another match. So you took a minute break, and then you came back and wrestled 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, and I was able to beat him, and by I think a score of 11-5 in overtime. So that was probably the most memorable match I ever wrestled, coming from behind.
What made you get involved in the sport of wrestling?
I had some friends in 7th grade that went out for wrestling, and it wasn't anything that I knew about or really had any comprehension of. I just kind of followed some of my neighborhood friends out to wrestling, and it just took. It was something that I did well, and I was small, real small, I was 75 pounds in 7th grade. So it was something, basketball wasn't working for me, football wasn't working for me. So it was just something that I could identify with, that something I needed. I was from a single parent home, and I needed some more discipline and guidance and boundaries in my life. So wrestling kind of gave me all those things.
If you had the opportunity to start your career over again, is there anything you would change?
I don't think there's anything I would change. I think everything was planned according to God's will in my life. There was times where I didn't understand why I was where I was in life, but now as I look back and where I am today, I can see that it was all part of his plan. Probably the only thing I'd like to do is go back and study more on mental toughness and the psychology of being an athlete, because that was kind of one of my weak spots when I wrestled. And it's something I noticed today, that a lot of kids walk into matches without confidence. So if I were to turn the clock back, I'd probably study that more, psychology and sports psychology.
Can I have you ask that question one more time? I just had one big hit on the mic. I apologize. That question one more time.
So say the whole
Scott,
thing over
Scott,
again?
No, I'll ask you, Scott.
Here, can
If
I
you
get
had
a-
the
hold
opportunity,
on, hold on. I'm just sweating up a, thanks. Yeah. Oof. Sorry. Thanks. I got it. That's fine. I'll put it here.
Thank you.
Scott, if you had the opportunity to start your career over again, is there anything you would change?
I don't think I'd change anything. I think everything went according to God's plan in my life. There was a lot of ups and downs, and there was a lot of moments where I didn't understand why I was going through what I was going through. But where I'm at today and looking back, I understand there was a purpose and a reason for that, what happened to me and the things that I went through as a coach and as an athlete and wrestler. So the only thing I'd probably change is go back and study sports psychology, learn a little bit more about the psyche and the mental toughness of being a wrestler, because that's where I lacked when I competed. And I notice a lot of kids today don't have a lot of confidence, or they need that mental toughness when they walk out there on the mat.
In concluding, what would you like people to remember about you?
I want people to remember that I was a compassionate coach, that I really cared about kids and went above and beyond maybe what some coaches do. I really looked out for the kids that were under my tutelage. Being from Santa Ana and one of the, probably one of the lowest economical areas in the United States, I felt led by God to just take care of them. If they needed $5 for a meal, I'd do that. If they needed a ride home, you know, if they needed some counseling and they had some issues, I kept them in check. I held them to expectations, and I just would want them to remember that I cared and I looked out for them, and most importantly that I gave them an opportunity to be involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes and have that chance to learn a little bit about who God is and rekindle that relationship with Him, or accept Jesus Christ as a personal Savior. So those two things I'd want them to remember.
Terrific, Scott.
Thank you.
And congratulations again
Yeah. Thank
on
you.
your contributions to the sport. They're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. Appreciate it.